prophecy. We're continuing on in the 70 weeks of Daniel. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 down to 27. Right in those three verses, or four verses, are a tremendous amount of information. I'll review a little bit on the 70 weeks. Gabriel came and told Daniel what was going to happen to their nation, because he'd been praying about it, and he saw the 70 weeks that Jeremiah had talked about, or 70 years that Jeremiah had talked about, were coming to an end. And so he wanted to know really what was going to happen to the nation of Israel. So God sent Gabriel to him to give him this message. And he said, 70 weeks are determined for your people in your holy city. Well, we found out from just history itself that 70 weeks was not 70 weeks of days, but turned out to be 70 weeks of years. And those are called heptads. And then it says, for your people and for your holy city. Now, this prophecy is concerning Israel and Jerusalem. The other thing that you really need to know is that God is a God of perfect timing. Amen. He has everything laid out in order of time and events. I watched the guy yesterday on Rock Island. If you ever looked at any of his stuff, Rock Island Books. He's out of New York. He's a Jewish guy. He's got everything. Boy, I mean, the dates and everything down. He believes. Now, it's what he believes. He believes that the rapture's coming this year, and that the second coming of the Lord will be in 30 or 31 A.D. I've always thought that the rapture would happen sometime around 30 A.D. But the rapture occurs 7 years before the second coming. So if you're looking at 30 or 31, you're looking at now. So I mean, he has a chart. You know, I don't like to pick times, but I like to look at signs, and I look at how God is a God of timing and events. And so let's continue on here. To make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Now, the command we looked at last week was given in Nehemiah chapter 2. And you can look at your chart here. You go all the way over here. And that command was given in 444 BC. Sir Robert Anderton, I believe, says 445. But it's about a year difference, depending on the calendar. But let's just say 444. The decree of Xerxes Longimanus for the Jews to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now we know that if you read the book of Ezra, and if you read Nehemiah chapter 2, Nehemiah was given the edict to go and restore the walls in the city and begin the restoration of the temple. Reading in Nehemiah, you'll find that it was in very troublesome times, because when they took the Jewish people back, now remember this, not all the Jews returned. I think maybe 70,000 returned. And it gives you the list of the tribes and a lot of them who returned. But a lot of the people that were in captivity for 70 years stayed in Babylon because they had roots there after 70 years. They didn't want to leave family and all that. So they stayed there. And you'll find that later, Peter went to preach to that group of people in Babylon. Now some say, well, that Babylon is Rome. Well, Rome was called Babylon because Rome was like Babylon in its evil. And a seat of Satan that was in Babylon was transferred to Rome. It went from Babylon to Pergamum to Rome. And Jesus even said in Revelation, I know where Satan's throne is. Well, at that time it was at Pergamum. But it moved down to Rome. And why? Because Rome adopted many of the cultures and things of the Babylonians, like Christmas, Easter, all these things here that we have assimilated into the church. But really, a lot of that came. Easter is Ishtar, the goddess of Ishtar. Christmas was changed because of Constantine on the looking at the shortest day of the year. He moved it to December 25th. Well, we know that Jesus was born at the Feast of Tabernacles, probably in September, October, depending on how the moon went. And that's what most believe. But I had a couple here. I had 2 or 3 couples here. So we just don't worship Christmas because it's a false day and all that. Says, well, it doesn't hurt to worship the Lord and His birth. And if that's when they picked it, well, that's okay. I'm not gonna get false religion in it. I don't think about false religion. I think just worshiping the Lord, Jesus' birth, and that's the day they picked in 325 AD. I think 325 AD, and that's when we do it around the whole world. But the good thing is, around the whole world, everybody's worshiping the Lord that are Christians, and particularly Catholicism, and Bethlehem is remembered, and masses of people go to Bethlehem if they can still get in it. When I was there, I got to actually go to Bethlehem 2 times and got to go into the Church of the Nativity. Got to go down and see the nativity scene. Y'all probably did too. Yes. Well, now it's a Palestinian city, and with the war going on, I bet hardly anybody can get in there unless you got a bulletproof car and a guide. It's a different city. But anyway, C.D. Lovett is the guy that has that Rock Island deal. And then I watched another very interesting thing I'm going to tell you by Jim Staley. He talked about the coming eclipse on the 8th of April. And it's amazing the path of that eclipse. It goes over 7 cities named Salem. It goes over 3 cities named Nineveh. It goes over a city called Little Egypt. It's amazing the path of that eclipse that's going to be coming in and how it makes a cross. The last eclipse that we saw also made a cross. And the pinpoint of the cross was over the fault line of the Mississippi River where they had the earthquakes. I was just talking to a lady Friday over at Walgreens, and she grew up in Tennessee on that lake that was created when the Mississippi turned its flow backwards from the earthquake. Now think about the mighty Mississippi. It was so huge that it turned the flow of the Mississippi totally backwards, and it went upstream. Oh my goodness. And what it did, it made a lake. Yeah. And once the lake was totally full, then the Mississippi started going back the other way. But she says the lake's still there, and it's one of the most beautiful places you've ever seen in Tennessee. And I was thinking, well, that was where the fault line, that's where the eclipse went over, in that fault line. And they say that area is due for another earthquake. Whoa. The largest one was 1812. That's when that occurred, when it turned. So, interesting facts. But this guy's name is Jim Staley. He has a ministry, I can't remember, but you just type in his name on YouTube. He has a video on YouTube. And it's very interesting. And then, of course, C.D. Lovett is the other guy. He's a Jewish guy, and he's written a book. And he's also got, he finally made some DVDs, Bereshith DVDs, and I'm going to buy them all, and we'll show them to our class. I mean, he was an artist, and he draws while he preaches, teaches. He's phenomenal. But I kind of disagree with some of his timelines and setting predictions of times. But he goes all the way back. But I know one thing: God is a God of timing. And when we studied this prophecy here, we know exactly that God was a God of timing, because He said know and understand. Now, why did Jesus condemn the Pharisees and all these scribes and things when He came on the scene? Because they should have known when He was coming.
That's right.
He says, you look at the sky and you can see it's going to be a hot day, or it's going to be a windy day, or it's going to be, whatever kind of day. You can look at the face of the sky and you can see that, but you can't even look at the signs of the times. The Messiah is standing right here in your midst and you don't even see it. Woe to you, Pharisees, because they should have known. If the wise men in Babylon knew that followed the star some 30 years before, then they should have known. I mean, when the wise men got there, Herod and his men that worked for him had no idea when they didn't even know where the king was going to be born. Because Herod was a idiot-making king that wasn't even a Jew. He didn't know anything about really much about Jewish culture. And the prophecy was given 700 years that he'd be born in Bethlehem by Micah. So, the thing on this, in the book of Daniel, you see these Babylonians had studied Daniel's writings. Many believe, now Hal Lindsey says there's two groups of these wise men. Some were the Jews that were left that read the scrolls of Daniel. And they were also astronomers. And then there was this group in Babylon that were the wise men around King Nebuchadnezzar that also studied Daniel's writings. And that was another group of wise men. So I'm more leaning on the Jewish side of it, that it was a group of Jews that were like wise men that went out looking for their king. And they read that scripture in Numbers 24. It said, his star will appear. His star will appear, but not right now. And then his scepter. Let me give you that scripture if y'all don't know that. Go to Numbers 24. I think it's 24:6. This was in one of Balaam's prophecies here. You remember who Balaam was? Okay, I'm sorry, it's 24:17. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of the tumult. Now see there that star? A star, and that star is capital, shall arise out of Jacob, and a scepter is capitalized, and shall rise out of Israel. That's talking about the Messiah that's coming. Well, they had studied that, and then they studied Daniel's writings, and then they were looking for a star, and they were looking for a coming king. And when they saw this star, and it was a magnificent star. If y'all have ever watched the video on the Star of Bethlehem? It's pretty interesting. It was a congregation of, I think, Jupiter, a star named Regulus, and Venus, all coming together in one conjugation over Bethlehem. And it was, tradition says, it created such a light that the whole noon, it was like the noonday at night. It was lit up. Wow. I mean, you couldn't have not seen Bethlehem. It was a miracle. It's the only time in history it's ever happened. We also have a comet coming. It's interesting. You know, Jesus said, look at the signs and wonders in the end times, because there will be a sign of my coming. Okay, now back to verse 26 of Daniel 9. And after 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. Now look at your chart here. And you can go out here, and you'll see here, Messiah will be cut off. Daniel 9:26, and that was when he was crucified. And notice it says not for himself. Well, he gave himself for the whole world. Not for himself, but for the whole world. And the people of the prince who shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, who is that? General Titus. The people of the prince who is to come. The prince to come is the Antichrist. And the people of that Antichrist system is the revived Roman Empire. And we're living in the revived Roman Empire now. It started in 1957 with the Treaty of Rome. 6 nations came together in Luxembourg and formed the Treaty of Rome. And that later became the European Union. Now there's 27 nations in the European Union, of which Britain has been trying to get out for about 5 years. It's very difficult to get out of that union once a nation joins up. I can tell you, there was a former president we had that tried to put us in that union. Thank God for the Senate. You know, Senate makes treaties and things like that, and he couldn't get it through. But if it had been him, he would have put us in that. And then you couldn't get out. You couldn't get out. But if you go into the European Union, you have to do away with your constitution. You have to burn it. And you take their constitution and their bylaws. See, Great Britain made that mistake. And the people don't like it at all in Britain. They've been trying to get out. It's called Brexit. Britain exit. They've had a couple leaders that have actually voted, and the people have voted to get out, but then the European Union won't let them out. Because of the money economically. Britain is pretty good economically, so I don't want one of those nations out. And then he says here, at the end it shall be a flood until the end of the war of desolations are determined. Now verse 27 is really important for the church right now. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Now what is that? That is when the Antichrist will come and sit down with the Jewish leaders and sign a peace covenant for 7 years, guaranteeing peace with Israel. They will be totally deceived. And when you read the description of the Antichrist over in Daniel chapter 11, 36 and 37, you find that this Antichrist will either be Jewish, part Jewish and Muslim, but he'll be Jewish, something Jewish, because it says that he will not regard the God of his fathers. There's only been one nation in the entire world that's only had one God of their fathers for 4,000 years, and that's Israel. So it said he will not regard the God of his fathers because he's the Antichrist. Nor the desire of women. Is that a hint? What his rule will be like? And he will do away with times and seasons and make his own. Daniel chapter 7. He'll create new times and new seasons. I was thinking last week when we had to change our time, that's the Antichrist. Taking over and making us change our times. That was something, I guess, that happened new, because when I was growing up, I never remembered us ever changing times. That came in later, Congress got in there and decided. But there's Louisiana and Arizona, they don't recognize any of that. And I think maybe, I don't know, Indiana may be the other one. There's like 3 or 4 states that do not change time zones. And so read over in Daniel 7 and 8 about the characteristics of the Antichrist. And I believe before this covenant is made, or if the covenant is if we start hearing that they're getting ready to make this peace treaty, this 7-year peace treaty, get ready, because I think the rapture's coming. That's one of the biggest signs of the rapture of the church. Because if that person makes a covenant with Israel for 7 years, we will know who the Antichrist is. But God doesn't want the church to know who the Antichrist is, because if we knew who he was, we would pray him and bind him, and he won't be able to fulfill any of the things prophesied, so God's got to get the church out. So we will go before this event, but we may start seeing and hearing about it. Right now, I'm seeing and hearing a lot about 2-state solutions, peace treaties in Gaza. All kinds of things are happening. But there's not that one person that can come and make that treaty yet, or promise peace yet. And the church will probably never know for sure. All we know is we're living in an Antichrist system. The system is totally Antichrist right now. And Paul lived in it. In fact, in 2 Thessalonians, he said that the Antichrist, the spirit of Antichrist was already at work in his day. Anti means against Christ. Even John, on writing to the church in 1 John, said that all those that said that Jesus Christ is not God in the flesh is the spirit of Antichrist. He was dealing with it too, and that was the Gnostics that he was dealing with. So let's get back to a chart. Now, Jesus rides in. Now, next week will be an anniversary of this. Fulfilling Zechariah 9:9, that the behold, your king is coming riding on the foal of a donkey. You see, they were also prophesied of how he would come and proclaimed to be the king. There was really just a small group of people that recognized him as the Messiah. And that was the one that celebrated his coming down the Mount of Olives to enter through the eastern gate. Now, you've been up on the Mount of Olives probably. Yes. Did you walk down where they made that path supposedly? Mm-hmm. That's pretty neat, isn't it? And actually it started over there at Bethany on the other side at where Lazarus' home was. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus and them. And you come up over the hill, and then they walk down. And they went across the Kidron Brook and then up into the eastern gate. Well, if you go to Israel today, the old eastern gate part is sealed off. The Muslims sealed it off. But there's all these burial tombstones and things out in the front of that because people wanted to be as close to the eastern gate as they could when the Messiah comes. Well, Jesus said, you missed your time of visitation. I've already come and gone. So it won't have anything to do with the eastern gate being sealed. God could just split it. But he's already done that. He's not going to do it again. He doesn't need to. And he came, that was the week of Passion, and he spent the whole week condemning those Jewish leaders because they didn't know who he was. And then, then he made the new covenant for us and went to the cross. And that's what I'm going to be talking about this morning, the blood of the cross. The importance of the cross that Christianity has gotten away from. I hardly ever listen to anybody ever teach on the cross anymore.
That's true.
And if it wasn't for the cross, there would be no Christianity. The Apostle Paul says, I didn't come to you with my enticing words of speech. I came with you that Christ and him crucified. The death, the burial, and the resurrection is my gospel. That's what he preached. And there was power in that message. Amen. To the point that people turn their hearts to God. Okay, continue on. Then we see here at 62 weeks, or 69 weeks, there's 1 week left to fulfill. That 1 week will be the 7-year tribulation period that will come up on the earth. And that's what we're looking for, because the church must leave before the tribulation begins. And that's a catching away. 1 Thessalonians 4 and 1 Corinthians 15. Antichrist makes a covenant with Israel, which begins 70th week. The rebuilding of the temple may be the result. Now, I get lots of Jewish magazines, and I get Friends of Israel. All those talk about that the Jews right now already have all the material they need to rebuild the temple stored up. They've already made the garments of the high priest. They've already made the utensils. They've made everything that is ready. Just all they need is access to the Temple Mount. But there's a problem up there. The Dome of the Rock sits up there, and the whole Temple Mount is desecrated with the Dome of the Rock being up there. So the Jews can't get up and rebuild the temple. Now, Hal Lindsey says, when they find a red heifer that they can sacrifice and get the ashes of the red heifer and make cleansing or pure oil of purification, they could go up and sprinkle the Temple Mount, cleanse it, and then start building. But trying to do that would create probably World War III between the Muslims and the Jewish people. When the Jews took Jerusalem in 1967, they didn't get the Temple Mount. The Muslims still controlled it because of the Dome of the Rocks up there. And why has God allowed that? Because He's not ready for them to get up on the Temple Mount. Because when they do, they're going to start sacrificing again. But Jesus is the ultimate and only sacrifice that He accepts. So He has prevented them from getting up there and doing this. So there's a reason for things and timing. I remember the day that Israel took Jerusalem in 1967. I was a senior in college. And I heard it on the radio because we didn't have TV. I heard it on the radio. I came in from a class, and my wife, she was working, I was going to school, and we all got together and ate lunch together. And I heard it on the radio that Israel, in the 6-day war, Israel had taken Jerusalem back. That was a big deal. Now, you might remember in 1917, 50 years before, they had taken the city under General Allenby. And on November the 30th, 1917, he declared Jerusalem an open city. The Ottoman Empire was destroyed, that had been in effect since 700 A.D. under the Muslim regime. I've been to Istanbul. I've been into the Museum of Suleiman the Magnificent. You should have seen the treasures that guy had. Well, where'd they get all that? They stole it all from the Jewish people and all the other peoples as they began to take over nation after nation and created caliphates. Now think about this. The Ottoman Empire ruled from about 700 to 1917. And the headquarters was in Constantinople. Later moved to Turkey. And I was just listening to yesterday by one of the guys on the TV about Turkey. And it's part of being part of the Ezekiel 37 and 38 Gog and Magog war. I don't believe that the Gog and Magog war will happen until after we're taken out. That will be in the first 3 years of the tribulation. And that is the Revelation chapter 6, the white horse, the red horse, the black horse, and the pale horse. Will be all the results of that war. But we won't be here. Because the white horse is the revelation of the Antichrist. And he'll begin at the beginning of the tribulation. And he'll rule for those 7 years. And remember about Revelation 13, he is empowered by Satan himself. Because there's war in heaven in Revelation 12, and Satan is cast out of the heavens, and he's just like Judas. Satan uses his body and uses the body of the Antichrist to do what he's going to do. That's what Satan did with Judas. Satan entered Judas and used his body until he went out and hung himself. And then Satan left. So there's only 2 places in the Bible that's mentioned as a son of perdition. One is Judas, and the other one is the Antichrist. So they're a type and shadow of the same type person. And this Antichrist will rule. And I think it was C.J. Lubbock was talking yesterday about the people that are left behind will be fed a lie.
Oh, yeah.
That all the people that are missing, God took all the evil people out and only the good people are left. That will be the deception.
Yeah.
Well, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the Bible says that God will send a strong delusion into the earth. And they will believe the lie and not the truth.
Yeah.
So there'll be so many people deceived. I've even heard people say, well, if I miss the rapture, I'll just get saved in the tribulation.
No.
Yeah, you can get saved in the tribulation, but you lose your head for it.
Yeah.
And it won't be easy because there will be deception. People will hear the truth now, but never give their hearts to Jesus, miss the rapture, and go into the tribulation and say, gosh, I missed it. Now I need to get to God. But it'll be tough. The Antichrist will have Gestapo troops and things to go out and find people.
Yeah.
And if they won't give their allegiance to the Antichrist, they will chop their heads off. Did y'all watch the Left Behind series?
Yeah.
And what it was like in that, Kirk Cameron, I think, played in some of those, and what it was like in the earth. It'll be that way. Don't miss the rapture, whatever you do. What time is it? I got about 5 minutes. Let's continue on. So the 70th week is the tribulation period. Now, look over here in your chart. We are in the parenthetical period called the church age. This is the gap that the prophets did not see. What Daniel saw was the first coming, or the period over here, and then he also saw this, but he didn't see the church in between. And that's why Paul says in Ephesians 3 that the mystery that had been hidden from the ages is now been revealed. The church. The church was a mystery. Not that God was trying to hide things, it just wasn't in the timing of his plan. Now, one thing that C.J. Lubbock talked about yesterday, and I've been on this for years with Hal Lindsey and many of us, we believe that in the 7 days of earth history, and each day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. So you had, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, when Christ came, when the light came on day 4. And then there was the 2 days of the church age, which was hidden, but we're coming to the end. And then the 7th day is the day of rest, and that's the millennial reign of Christ. Just think about it. We're coming to the end of the 6th day in 2030. I think that's historic. And I truly believe what's going to happen is God's going to bring one of the largest revivals in the history of the world. This is going to be a God revival, where he's going to pour out the Holy Spirit on all flesh. People that respond to the outpouring will be coming together, flocking together, filling up churches, filling up stadiums, and they're just going to begin to worship the Lord because the Lord is coming soon. And that's in the next 5 years, probably 5, 6 years. Some say 2030, some say 2031, some say 2033. But if you look at the timing of the Jewish timing, they believe Adam was created in 4004 AME, not BC, but AME. Christ came at 4 BC. And now in O'Reilly, in Bill O'Reilly's book on the killing of Jesus, he and his author, Dugard, went back and said, well, Jesus was born in 7 BC, but it couldn't have been. That puts him, Jesus only lived 33 years. So it couldn't have been there. And Jesus had to be alive when Herod was alive. And Herod died around in the spring of 3 BC. So Jesus already had to be alive, because he went and tried to kill all the babies. So I believe it. So you go from 4004 BC to 4 BC. That's exactly 4 days. So when you go back to the Genesis account and you read in Genesis, it said on the 4th day God created the light. The light came, and then John said in John 1 that he was the light that came. But people did not receive the light. They loved darkness instead of light. And so on the 4th day, now we got these 2 days, and Peter reminds us, and also in Psalms 90 verse 4, it says, a day is to the Lord as a year, 1,000 years, 1,000 years a day. And then Peter, in 2 Peter says, let us always remember that a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is to the Lord. So if we're looking at 7,000 or 6,000 years, we're coming to the end of this 6th day. So go to Hosea 6 and read the first 4 verses there. And it says, after 2 days, I'm going to read that to you. And he's talking to the Jewish people here. Because remember the story of Hosea. Hosea was told to marry Gomer. And then Gomer, you talk about a story of love. It was a love between Hosea and Gomer. I mean, a woman named Gomer. I always think of Gomer Pyle. Well, evidently she is a beautiful girl. And he fell in love with her. And he married her. And they had a couple of kids. And then one day she just deserted him. And left him. Went back down and lived with her old John that used to live down on the street. She stayed down there, and he was taking care of the kids. And one day, he found out that guy was going to kick her out of the house and put her up for sale, try to recoup some money. So Hosea was a pottery maker, and he had some money. So he told all of his friends, he said, I'm going to go down there and buy her back. And they said, you are the biggest idiot. Look what she did to you. He said, I love her. I love her. You know, love has a very strong influence over people. And so he went down there, and he took all the money he had and bought Gomer back and brought her back into the house. Well, this was a picture of Israel. God loved Israel. He married Israel. Then he divorced Israel. But now he says, I will take her back. But that'll be in the millennium. So right now, Israel is in a state of divorcement. So he says here, now, after this divorcement that it's in, come and let us return to the Lord, for he has torn us and he will heal us. He has stricken us, but he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us, and on the 3rd day, he will raise us up. 2 days, 2,000 years, and on the 3rd day will be the millennial reign. Also, Bob Yennion wrote in his book on the oil and the wine, in the parable of the Good Samaritan. When the Good Samaritan picked up the injured man and took him to the inn, he paid for how many days? 2 days. And he says, I will return, and if I owe more, I'll pay it then. I think it's significant. He paid for 2 days, 2 denarii, in the inn, for the innkeeper. Well, Bob's little book is really a good little book. He picked up on that. And by the way, he'll be here in June. June 23rd. Leon Patillo will be with us next in 2 weeks, April the 7th. Sunday morning, Sunday night. You ever seen Leon Patillo? Oh, man. He is he used to play keyboards for Santana, the band. And he got saved, and he's been here two other times, but his son plays for Toby Mac. I mean, he's quite a musician, singer, preacher, extraordinaire. But he'll be with us on April the 7th. I'm trying to get all my times in. I'm going to get David Weeder back probably in October if I can. I'm going to get Justin and Annette Bridges if I can get them sometime this summer, hopefully. We're not doing a camp meeting this year. I'm splitting them up into different groups, because when you do a camp meeting, you just put them all together and they only get 1 time or 2 times. Yeah. But, you know, if you bring them in separately, they get more time to actually minister. So, and it's a lot less expensive. Okay, I've got to quit right there. Remember, the 70th week is still coming, and it is the Great Tribulation period. And we'll maybe talk a little bit about that next week. And then we'll get into maybe Ezekiel 37, 38. Thank you for joining us. God bless you. We're going down to the next service. We'll be talking about the blood of the cross this morning. And then tonight, I'll be live streaming. I'll be teaching tonight at 6:30. From 6:30 to 7 on the live stream. So please join us. God bless you.